So at this stage, I went through my alpha and brush library, and I'm just going through. First, I'll do a morph target. I'll divide it up to 1,000,000 polys, do a morph target, and then just first do a sort of light drag rectangle and spray pass to kind of just get everything nice and noisy and not looking too computer-like. But that's a very, very fine, like almost very tertiary detail pass, and then I'll go in with the Damien Standard brush, and it's just like rendering in pencil, where I'm just going in and carving in lines and adding lines that emphasize forms and really create this nice sort of detailed composition of wrinkles and veins and sharp little like fingernail like fibers along the crest there. One thing, wrinkle anatomy is there's a lot of rule sets to it, just as much as like muscle anatomy, where you need to be very aware where the skin's compressing, where it wouldn't compress, and that's how you get really nice, elaborate wrinkle composition that looks nice and natural. It's okay here. I feel like I could have gone a little bit further on it, but that'll happen with the next sketch I do. One other thing I tried out with this sketch was, you saw just there, I did a fiber mesh pass to just bring it to marmoset later as a just big pass of hairs to get that final bit of realism. And since this isn't a game character, I'm not really worried about poly count. Another thing I tried out was to see if I could use the extract option to get sort of a caked dried mud look like you would see on water buffalo or wildebeests. You'll see it in a sec here. It came out okay. I feel like I got to do it a couple more times before I really get it so it's looking just really nice. One thing I do like to do is with the mask by peaks and valleys, I'll do that, and then I'll actually put a lighter value in the crevices. I just think it kind of looks a little more interesting. And I'm just continuing to add wrinkles and just playing around with different kinds of color and value. One thing is, always keep in mind that value composition is always going to be way more important than color composition, so it's really tempting to go in with like those bright blues and oranges and reds and like put down all those colorful stripes like you'd see like on tropical fish and stuff. But if you don't have values isolating and directing where facial features are, then it's kind of going to end up looking messy and chaotic, and you'll just kind of be going in circles, just not understanding why it just doesn't look clear where all the stuff on your creature is. So right now the creature looks pretty dull. It's just sort of a series of browns and grays and blacks, but that's usually kind of how I go about poly painting in ZBrush. I don't really work with color too much in poly paint. It's just my personal preference. And I like to add any kinds of color later on in Photoshop. And when I'm doing an illustration, I'll just paint all the color in the painting process by hand, and I just kind of experiment in that stage. Right here, I'm doing a very sloppy, quick and dirty retop and UV layout. I'm just using Z Remesher and UV Master and kind of just using whatever the engine gives me. If I was doing like a video game character, this would be like an unforgivable kind of workflow, but this is just solely for painting purposes, so you can be as quick and dirty as possible. But if you're ever going to make a video game character, really, you got to really take care of poly count, UV space, UV layout, just all that stuff. Right here, I'm using TopoGun to bake an AO map and XNormal, which is free, and you can bake AO maps in XNormal as well. I just kind of prefer TopoGun. I just like their AO maps with my preferences. Right here, I'm just making a real quick material ID map that's just bright colors to indicate what kind of material is going to be applied later on in the Quixel suite. So you just have colors that assign, like, okay, this is going to be bone, this is going to be mud, this is going to be pachyderm skin, this is going to be wet, like salamander skin, things like that. It helps a lot later on in the texture process. So this part of the baking process, it's probably the most technical part of being a 3D artist, and this is just kind of a quick run-through video, so there's no way I could cover all the complexity that goes into baking good normal maps and AO maps, and it's definitely needed. I don't feel like there's a lot of easy access to these kind of lessons, and I think it's like the most important part of your resume if you're going to come into the industry. So in the meantime, though, Phan, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, is one of the best teachers, I think, when it comes to good baking and just good fundamentals of game character design. I'll put his link to his channel here in the description, so you can go over and check his stuff out. So still baking the maps here and just troubleshooting. One of the things about baking is half of it is just doing a lot of troubleshooting. If you're going to find problems with your first bake, and you'll go back and experiment with the ray distance, and it's definitely the most tedious process, but after doing it for long enough, you can kind of come to expect whatever problems may arise. You'll usually find a good solution to them. That's a nice video set I'd like to do, is just the aspect of troubleshooting whenever stuff comes back in your normal map that just you're like, what? How did that happen? So now I'm launching up the Quixel suite, which is a really nice new PBR texture software that has this library of scan materials and different sorts of map assets that lay out a default specular, gloss, normal, and diffuse influence over the polypaint data you have. It's a really nice program. It's kind of part of my workflow whenever I make something in 3D now. It's definitely not a magic button. You still have to really tweak with it a lot and understand, what specular values will hurt or help your composition in the end. The other thing I'm doing right now is setting up a scene in Marmoset and really playing with the lighting. For this sketch, I really looked a lot at Anthony Jones's paintings, which are just mind-blowingly good, and I'm loving his super high contrast, lots of atmospheric and lost edge quality with his shadows and his super bright lights with lots of specularity, so kind of wanted to mimic that with this setup here I have in Marmoset.